Today on Daily Dose Documentary, the Battle of Midway. By early May of 1942, the Japanese Empire was in the triumphant phase of its expansionist campaigns in the Pacific, now in control of most of the western Pacific basin. They had crushed the British in Hong Kong, Malaya, Borneo, and Singapore by February, along with the vital supply port of Rabaul at the tip of New Britain. The following month, the Dutch would lose their vital oil fields on Sumatra and Java, while in April, Bataan had fallen to the Japanese, resulting in the largest surrender in American history, when 75,000 Filipino and American troops fell into Japanese captivity, leading to the Bataan Death March, which took the lives of an estimated 17,000 Allied soldiers. In May, the besieged island of Corregidor had fallen, while British resistance in Burma ended in a humiliating retreat back to the Indian frontier. All in all, the Allies, it seems, were losing the War of the Pacific, with both India and Australia under imminent threat of invasion. 6 months after Japan's unprovoked attack on American personnel and naval assets at Pearl Harbor, and a month after Japan's victory at the Battle of the Coral Sea, nervous Japanese war leaders played a game of hurry-up to expand their reach in the Pacific, under the growing fear that the Americans' expanding wartime industrial complex would soon outpace their own in both personnel, warships, and planes. Led by Japanese Navy Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, he set his sights on the Americans' new naval and air force base on Midway Atoll, which was a pair of islands midway between the United States and Japan, under the strategic imperative of defeating the Americans before their war production could reach full capacity. Hoping to mirror the success of Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, Yamamoto's attack plan called for a 3-phase assault on Midway, while a 4th phase would include an attack on the Aleutian Islands off the coast of Alaska, intended to divert American naval assets away from Midway, just as his 3-phase attack plan went into motion. Led by Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo of the 1st Carrier Striking Force, Phase 1 called for an air attack on Midway Atoll, launched from the first-line aircraft carriers the Akagi, Kaga, Hiryu, and Soryu. After the destruction of Midway's defenses, Phase 2, led by Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo, would include a land invasion by Kondo's 5,000-man army, intended to crush any remaining American forces on the ground. Fully expecting American reinforcements ordered in from Pearl Harbor to fill the void left by Yamamoto's diversionary tactics along the Aleutian chain, Phase 3 would include a second strike by Nagumo's forces, in concert with Yamamoto's own fleet of battleships, carriers, and destroyers, waiting to close in for the kill some 600 miles to the west, with the hope of overwhelming American military might, a move that would hand the Empire of Japan a decisive victory at Midway, along with a geographic stronghold in the Pacific that could even threaten the west coast of the United States. Despite the thoroughness of Yamamoto's plan, what he could not have known was that the Americans had successfully broken the Japanese Navy's cipher code. Led by Commander Joseph Rochefort of the U.S. Navy's Combat Intelligence Unit, working from their windowless basement offices at Pearl Harbor, by March of 1942, Rochefort's unit had spent long hours and months on Japan's naval code, which by the time of Yamamoto's attack, the unit had completely mastered Japan's secret code. Led by Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, when the deciphered Japanese playbook landed on his desk, Nimitz quickly drew up a plan of attack, which relied heavily on a fight from the air, while his carriers would remain well out of striking distance of the Japanese Navy. In response to Yamamoto's planned offensive at Midway, Nimitz sent 2 carrier groups into action, with Admiral Frank J. Fletcher of Task Force 17 given command of all tactical decisions aboard his flagship, the USS Yorktown. The second carrier group, Task Force 16, was led by Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, including the aircraft carriers Enterprise and Hornet. And while Yamamoto firmly believed that he had the Americans cornered by his plan, Nimitz's two carrier groups would successfully lay a trap on the Japanese Navy. Unbeknownst to Yamamoto, when his strike on the Aleutian Islands began as planned on June the 3rd, his forces encounter a small contingent of American Navy warships blocking their path, and as Yamamoto's Phase 1 forces approach Midway, he receives disturbing intelligence that American carriers might be somewhere near his location. And while Yamamoto at first wants to inform Nagumo of the possibility of enemy ships in the area, Yamamoto chooses to maintain radio silence due to the suspicions that the Americans would be listening in on all Japanese radio traffic. At 9:25 in the morning, as U.S. forces on Midway prepare for the pending Japanese attack, Ensign Jack Reed flies his PBY Catalina on a reconnaissance flight despite conditions of heavy fog, at last spotting what he thinks to be Japan's main fleet, which in reality proves to be Vice Admiral Kondo's Phase 2 invasion force. In response to Reed's radio message, 9 B-17 heavy bombers are dispatched from Midway, attacking Kondo's ships without any direct hits, yet marking the first military engagement of the Battle of Midway. Adhering to Japan's policy of radio silence, Kondo fails to notify Nagumo of the bomber attack, leaving the later admiral unaware of the Americans' impending ambush. On the morning of June the 4th, Nagumo launches 108 aircraft from his flight decks, including A6M-0 fighters, D-3A Val dive bombers, and B-5N Kate torpedo bombers, unaware that the Americans have already launched 15 B-17 bombers from Midway, followed by 4 separate groups of aircraft intent on attacking the Japanese fleet, including 6 Navy Grumman TBFs, 4 Army B-26 Marauders, 16 Marine SBD-2 Dauntless, and 11 Marine SB-2U Vindicators. Meanwhile on Midway, air raid sirens blare at 5:56 on the morning of June the 4th, after incoming Japanese planes are spotted, obliging ground and air forces to engage the enemy at 6:16, with squadrons of F-2S Buffaloes and F-4F Wildcat fighters. Despite the Americans' counteroffensive, American fighters are badly outnumbered, leading to substantial damage on the ground, including hangars, runways, a hospital, and a power plant during Japan's 27-minute attack. Breaking radio silence after Phase 1 of his plan at 7:05, Nagumo receives word from his Phase 1 attack pilots that a second air assault will be necessary to completely incapacitate the Americans' infrastructure on Midway, forcing him to delay any decisions as he weighs the consequences of yet another air attack instead of engaging the enemy in a naval battle. Before he can decide, torpedoes rain down on his fleet from American squadrons launched earlier in the morning from Midway, leaving him shocked by the reality that the Americans knew his position before he ordered his Phase 1 attack. Still indecisive over how to proceed, the American submarine Nautilus closes on his fleet from behind, prompting Nagumo to order his planes to Midway for a second attack at 7:15 a.m. 13 minutes after Nagumo orders his attack, a Japanese scout plane spots 10 American warships on an intercept route, and as American pilots continue to attack his fleet, he orders his crews to stop arming bombs intended for Midway, but instead to prepare his aircraft for naval warfare by arming his planes with torpedoes. Meanwhile, across the battlefield, Admiral Spruance launches 116 aircraft from the flight decks of the Enterprise and Hornet, while the Yorktown prepares to launch even more fighters against the enemy. At 8:20, Nagumo receives confirmation of an American aircraft carrier in the area, and while he's badly shaken by the unforeseen American trap, he can't initiate an offensive attack until he has successfully retrieved his bombers, still on a return flight from Midway. Yamamoto also receives the report of an American carrier in the area, yet in a decision that would prove costly for the Japanese, he does not interfere with Nagumo's apparent delay in attacking the American carrier group. Finally recovering his bombers from the Midway raid, Nagumo orders his fleet toward the position of the one known American carrier group, just as the first squadron of Devastator dive bombers arrives from the Hornet, followed by 11 from the Yorktown. Lacking any fighter escorts, of the 26 Devastators involved in the attack on Nagumo's fleet, only 6 will return to their carrier decks. The mass downing of American bombers injects a heady sense of confidence into the Japanese fleet, yet as Nagumo refuels and rearms his fighters, 26 American Dauntless dive out of the sun to bomb the Kaga. Led by Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey, his squadron of Dauntless are the first to launch off the Enterprise at 7:06 a.m. But when they reach the supposed location of the Japanese fleet, all they find is an open ocean devoid of enemy warships. Dangerously low on fuel and unable to contact his superiors due to an order of radio silence, McCluskey weighs the odds of either returning immediately to the Enterprise or taking one last stab at the enemy with what little fuel he has left. McCluskey makes a choice that Admiral Nimitz would later call one of the most important decisions of the battle, turning northwest to follow the path he thinks the Japanese would take toward the American fleet, an almost instinctive decision that was about to determine the course and outcome of the battle. McCluskey's bombs make multiple hits on the Kaga, one exploding a gasoline truck near the bridge that kills the entire command staff, while other hits leave the Kaga dead in the water. Minutes after McCluskey's attack, fighters and bombers from the Yorktown focus on the Soryu, inflicting 3 hits on the ship's port side that ignites the ship's magazine, setting off a chain reaction of explosions and fires that engulf the entire ship. The same squadron from the Yorktown then sets their sights on Nagumo's flagship, the Akagi, decimating planes as they wait to take off, in what one Japanese sailor would later describe as a burning hell. Forced to transfer to the light cruiser Nagara from the burning Akagi, Nagumo breaks radio silence to update Yamamoto about the devastating news of the Americans' attack, informing his commander that only the Hiryu remains in operational condition due to the fact that the Hiryu was well ahead of the other Japanese carriers in his group. Realizing he's losing the fight, Nagumo launches 18 dive bombers and 6 fighters from the Hiryu, only to get battered by a swarm of American fighters. After the Americans break off the dogfight at noon, 14 remaining Japanese planes descend on the Yorktown, setting the ship ablaze within minutes. Damaged but still functioning, Admiral Fletcher hands over his command of the battle to Admiral Spruance aboard the Enterprise, before transferring to the heavy cruiser Astoria. Still wanting to stay in the fight, Nagumo launches a second wave of fighters from the Hiryu, which are intercepted 15 minutes away from the Yorktown by more American fighters. Whittled down to 5 surviving Japanese torpedo bombers, the planes land 2 hits on the Yorktown, which soon lists 26 degrees to port, so much so that the Yorktown's port flight deck nearly touches the water, until Yorktown Captain Elliot Buckmaster gives his abandoned ship order at 14:55. The Hiryu has cost the Americans dearly, prompting Admiral Spruance to order all available dive bombers to attack the Hiryu, some 72 miles out from the Yorktown. In response, 40 unescorted Dauntless dive bombers lift off from the Enterprise and Hornet, before diving repeatedly on the Hiryu until the ship floats dead in the water, at the same time ending the Battle of Midway with a crushing defeat for the Japanese. While several small clashes would follow over the next couple of days, the Americans' victory at Midway proves to be a turning point battle in the War of the Pacific, ending Japan's expansionist aggression to one of defensive pullback as the Americans continue their press for the home islands of Japan. The battle would prove costly for both combatants, yet Japan's losses would prove much more devastating and impactful than the Americans, as the Americans were now outpacing Japan's ability to produce weapons of war. The Americans suffered casualties of 1 fleet carrier, 150 aircraft, and 307 fatalities, while the Japanese lost 4 fleet carriers, 1 heavy cruiser sunk, 1 heavy cruiser and 2 destroyers severely damaged, and 248 aircraft, at a cost of 3,057 killed in action. While their defeat at Midway badly drained morale from the Japanese military, America's victory at Midway highlighted the indispensable power of code-breaking and tactical foresight, while energizing the American public back home, making the Battle of Midway a turning point moment in the Allies' push for Tokyo.